All right, so we're in the week of January 25th through 27th, and we're going to be covering tissues this week. So 2 days on that. And then next week, we'll review Practical 1 on Monday and take Practical 1 on Wednesday. All right, so let's start with tissues. So 4 basic types of tissues. So we've got nervous tissue, muscle tissue, epithelial tissue, connective tissue. Remember, tissues are cells that have a similar function, work together, right? Remember our levels of organization? Remember, you have your molecular or atoms and molecules, organelles and cells, tissues, your organ systems, your organisms. So these are different tissues. These different tissues can work together to make organs. Okay, so link that back to what you've already learned. So these are our 4 major types. What's our function of nervous tissue? Well, it's internal communication, right? From your brain, spinal cord, and nerves. Okay, it tells your body what to do. We have muscle tissue, right? And what does muscle tissue do? Well, it contracts. And why is that important? Because contraction causes movement. Okay. So we have 3 different kinds of muscle tissue. We'll cover this more a little bit later. We have skeletal muscle, which is muscle attached to your bones. Okay. And you've got cardiac tissue, which is muscles in your heart. And we have smooth muscle tissue, which is muscles in the walls of hollow organs like your intestines or your blood vessels. Okay. So I just want to be clear. If I ask you what kind of muscle is in your blood vessels, you say smooth muscle. If I ask you what kind of muscle tissue is in your heart, you say cardiac muscle tissue. Right? Cardiac muscle is only found in the heart. And we have epithelial tissue. What is its job? Be a boundary between different environments, inside and outside. Provides protection, provides secretion, absorption, also serves as a filter. And we have examples here, lining of your gastrointestinal tract, GI and gastrointestinal, and other hollow organs. It's the lining. You kind of barrier between environments. And the surface of your skin, your epidermis is epithelial tissue. Then we have connective tissue. It supports, protects, binds other tissues together. It connects them, as the name suggests. Okay. Examples are bones, tendons, fats is a connective tissue. All right. So that's your basic overview. Okay, the different kinds of tissue. Okay, again, nervous, muscle, epithelial, connective. Okay, say it with me. Nervous, muscle, epithelial, connective. All right. All right, so, all right, let's say it. We can say it one more time. All right. Nervous, muscle, epithelial, connective. All right, good. All right. So start with epithelial tissue, several different kinds. Okay, it's probably going to be the type of tissue that has the most varieties. Okay, well, I take that back. So between epithelial and connective, and then once we get to nervous and muscle, not very many. Okay, so epithelial tissue, we're going to have simple squamous as our starting one. Okay, so squamous. So we can describe epithelial tissue by number of layers and the shape of the cell. So All right, so this 1, 2. We'll do shape first. Let's say simply flat or irregular. So anytime you have one layer, it's simple. All right. And flat or irregular is squamous. All right, here's another example. These ones you can really kind of see the flattened kind of pancake type shape to them, okay? If they're irregular, no real pattern, okay? These are simple squamous epithelial tissue. All right, so here's another example of simple squamous epithelial tissue. All right, and look at where the line is pointing to. It's not pointing to everything, just this line. All right, one line of flat cells, okay? All right, you also have flat cells in multiple layers. Anytime it's more than one, I should say 2 plus or 2 or more. So then it's stratified squamous. All right, and this is example here is the lining of your esophagus and your throat. Okay. And how do you know it's stratified squamous? One layer or multiple layers? Multiple layers. Are the cells square, rectangular, or flat? The cells in here square, rectangular, or flat? They're flat. It's stratified squamous. So you are going to have to look on the practical, look at slides and figure out what things are. I don't want you to try to memorize it all. I want you to just kind of try to look at it and try to tell what things are so you don't have to remember so much. All right, here's another example. Multiple layers of flat cells, stratified squamous. All right, another type of cell shape. These are more square or cube shaped, so they're cuboidal. If there's one layer of cuboidal cells, I guess I'll say cube shape, probably a better description. It's one layer, simple cuboidal. All right. So this example here is a kidney tubules. And how do you know it's simple cuboidal? Each of these is one layer. And what shape are the cells? They are cube shaped. All right. They're like kind of little cubes in there. Okay. So simple cuboidal. Another example, one layer of cube-shaped cells. Say that 3 times fast, right? Cube-shaped cells. Yeah. All right. Okay. Now, cells can also be rectangular or column-shaped. There's one layer, simple columnar. Okay. You can see here one layer, and they're rectangular or cube or columnar shape, right? Here's the rectangular. Can y'all see that? All right. Thumbs up if you can see they look columnar. Okay. If you're not sure or you can't really tell, you can. All right, good. Okay. This is at kind of lower level magnification, but again, one layer thick. These are all rectangular or columnar shaped. All right. And don't get caught up in what's the top or the bottom because it just depends on where the slide is, okay? Or where it's pointing to. Okay, so just look at the shape. Okay, number of layers. All right, we also have some cells where some of the cells go all the way up and down from the top to the bottom. Other cells do not. So we call that pseudo-stratified because what it looks like is where you, in some places it looks like you got 2 layers, some places it looks like you have 1. Okay, so this is pseudo-stratified. So this is sort of I'll put a little box in here, kind of in the middle. Pseudo-stratified columnar. It looks like 2 layers in some places not. Okay. Another example here. And you typically are going to see these cilia. Remember we learned about those little cellular extensions on the outside of the cells, the cilia? You're usually going to see these on your columnar epithelium. Okay. And these are goblet cells, and they usually will secrete mucus. Okay, it's like in your trachea, you want to make, capture things that maybe get in your throat. You get phlegm. You want to be able to capture all of the dirt and things like that. Mucus and the cilia help you do that. All right. So to me, there's not really a great way to say this, but to me, these look sort of like pillows or clouds. So typically what we're going to use, these are, when you see that, this is called transitional epithelia. Using multiple layers. Where do we usually see this? Urinary bladder, okay? So if you see transitional epithelium, it's usually urinary bladder. And the characteristic of the urinary bladder cells is that they have to be stretchy. Why do they have to be stretchy? Because sometimes your bladder is full, sometimes it's empty, right? It's got to be able to stretch to accommodate that. Right? All right. So, all right. So that is epithelial tissue, okay? So hopefully this gives you kind of an overview in terms of how to tell the different types of tissue, okay? So all right, so let's review. So epithelial tissue has 1 layer, we call what? If it has multiple layers, we call it. If the cells are flat or irregular, we call them squamous. If they are rectangular, we call them columnar. If they are more cube shaped, we call them cuboidal. Okay, very good. All right. So now we're talking about connective tissue. All right, and here we've got some categories. So, it's also helpful to kind of organize the information. So this first one we're going to start with is areolar. And to me, this looks like a framework. Like there's, like bars and things going across, and you got some string, and you're kind of building them kind of like a web or a meshwork. Okay. So anytime you see this, and a lot of this is like collagen fibers and things like that we'll learn about later. But when you see this sort of meshwork structure, that's areolar connective tissue. All right, so here's another example. You still see this kind of network or meshwork, okay, which will look different from the other types of connective tissue we'll see. All right, so next type of connective tissue we're studying here is adipose tissue. All right, so adipose tissue is, what is adipose? Anybody know? It's fat, right? So, we have fat at different places in our bodies. Obviously here you got fat in the mammary glands, but you have them in other places too. But basically when you see these big white circles, that's adipose tissue, okay? So it's your red flag that you're looking at adipose tissue, okay? All right, again, you see the big white circles, okay? Okay. So this next tissue is what we call dense fibrous or dense regular, okay? Dense means packed, right? Just like to be dense. Like if something is denser than water, it sinks because it's packed tightly, right? So you basically have the fibers packed closely together. Can y'all see that looks a lot different from that areolar where it was all spread out? Okay, so it's dense. Now, it's also regular. It has sort of a wavy pattern. They all kind of fit together. This is dense regular, or dense fiber. Okay. See this in tendons. Here's another example. You can kind of see the regular wavy pattern, right? Can y'all see that? Okay. All right. This one's reticular connective tissue. Okay. So you might see this in the liver. Okay. Now, characteristic, you're looking at reticular connective tissue. These black lines. If you see the black lines, it's typically going to be reticular connective tissue. Okay? These are what we call reticular fibers. Okay? If you see the black lines, it's reticular. All right. Here, can y'all see the black lines on this one? Okay, because it depends on how they stain it, but you should still be able to see the dark lines. Okay. This is bone tissue. Okay, bone is connective tissue, right? Essentially connects the structure of your body together, right? So how do you know you're looking at bone tissue? Typically, if you see these circles like this, these rings that look kind of like the rings on a tree, right? If you slice open a tree, that's bone, okay? Now, you have bone cells, called osteocytes, and they live in these little spaces in here, these little dark spaces called lacunae. Those little spaces are called lacunae. Okay. But this is bone tissue. You see the circle. You have a question? Okay. All right. See the circles, right? See the rings. Bone tissue. Your bone cells in the lacunae. All right. So bone is connective tissue. Cartilage is also connective tissue. Okay. And there's different kinds of cartilage. So first type of cartilage we're going to study is hyaline cartilage. Okay. So when you see these little circles or kind of look like little bubbles with little dots in them, that's cartilage. Then the question is, which type of cartilage is it? Okay. So when you see this kind of meshwork or these little circles or these little eyes, that's cartilage. And hyaline is kind of like your generic cartilage. Okay. Like here you have the cartilage in your ribs. That's hyaline cartilage. You kind of get this pinkish purple space here. Now, the cells, in cartilage, we call these chondrocytes. Cytes means cells. Chondro means cartilage. The bone cells were osteocytes. Osteo means bone. All right, but that's in this general kind of space that these osteo or these chondrocytes live in, we call that matrix. Okay, so like all this pink and purplish stuff in here is matrix, and the chondrocytes live in that space. All right. Then we have fibrocartilage. Okay, you see all the little dots, the eyes, so you know it's cartilage, right? You see those in there? But how does this one look different from the one we just saw? Are they frozen? Well, some of them are, but what's in the matrix? Wavy lines. So there's fibers in it. Okay, so it's fibrocartilage. All right. So where would you need more fibrous cartilage? Well, in your vertebrae. Okay. So your intervertebral discs have fibrous cartilage in it. So you see these kind of little blue lines, and they may not be blue depending on how they stain it, but if you see the lines in the cartilage, it's fibrocartilage. Those are fibers. All right, so that is connective tissue. All right, so just to review real quick, you see black lines, what kind of cartilage or what kind of connective tissue are we talking about? Anybody remember? If you see the black lines, reticular. You see the white circles, what are we talking about? Adipose tissue, okay? If you see the little circles with the little dots in them, it's cartilage, okay? If that has no lines in it, then it is, what type of cartilage has no lines running through it? Hyaline cartilage. If it has lines, then it is fibrocartilage, okay? Now, if you see rings, what kind of connective tissue? It's bone. Okay, very good. All right. So if you see kind of a meshwork or web-like structure, what kind of connective tissue is that? Areolar. Good. All right. So muscle. Okay, like we said earlier, there are 3 types of muscle tissue. So for the muscle tissue, we've got this first one. This is skeletal muscle. All right, so if you see this kind of regular pattern, you see these kind of vertical lines, kind of also running kind of straight lines across. That's your muscle tissue, okay? Can everybody see that this looks different from epithelial tissue or connective tissue? Because you want to sort of in your mind go, which of the 4 categories in it is this? And then you start working your way down your list. Okay, does that make sense? Okay. These little purple things in here, those are the nuclei of the cells. Skeletal muscle, multiple nuclei per cell. Okay. So skeletal. The first criteria looking at nuclei per cell. All right. It's many. Many nuclei per cell, multinucleate. Next factor is striation. The lines, these little vertical lines. Yes. And is it voluntary? Answer is yes. You have to think, typically, unless you're having like a muscle spasm, you generally have to think to make your skeletal muscles move. Okay? They usually just don't move on their own. All right, so each essentially row is an actual skeletal muscle fiber. Okay? So are y'all missing this in the notes, or y'all got a question or anything? Sure, sorry, it says nuclei per cell. I know it's really small. Nuclei per cell. So, and again, all these little lines are striations. Okay. But this is a muscle fiber, this is a muscle fiber, this is a muscle fiber. These are all nuclei. All right. Next type of muscle, cardiac muscle. Where do we say we find it? In the heart. Okay. So what you see in here are these characteristic dark lines here. Those are called intercalated discs. They're communication between cardiac muscle cells. All right, or they allow for that. Okay, you can see the nuclei again, but here only have, you see as many nuclei as you did on the last slide? No, all right, so one nuclei per cell. Also, these cells are branched. I don't know if you can see that here, but they kind of go diagonally, so they're branched. All right. So one nuclei per cell, nucleus per cell for cardiac muscle tissue. They are striated. They are not voluntary. You don't have to think to make your heart beat. Okay. So then I'll put over here brain and intercalated discs. That's things you want to remember about cardiac muscle tissue. And heart. Skeletal. Attached to the skeleton. Okay. All right. You see the intercalated disc. Okay. Right, so that's your characteristic that it is cardiac muscle. And we have the smooth muscle. Okay. So these muscle cells, do you see the striation lines? They're red, but do you see the vertical lines on these? No, so these are not striated. Okay. One nuclei per cell. These are also spindle shaped, like they're pointy on the ends. All right, and they're involuntary. Again, you see when you're lining your digestive organs. So one nucleus per cell, no striations, and not voluntary. Okay, you don't think to move them. So it's a spindle shape. It's maybe hard to read. Spindle shape. Walls of the hollow organs. All right, so here's another example. Okay, so here's some smooth muscle. Okay, cells, again, no striations, spindle-shaped cells. All right, so that's muscle tissue. Three types. Three types of smooth, or three types of muscle tissue. What are the three types? Smooth, skeletal, cardiac, which is found in the heart. Cardiac, which is found on the bone, which is found on the walls of hollow organs. Okay, which ones are voluntary? Skeletal, which ones are involuntary? Okay, which ones are striated? Skeletal and cardiac, which ones are not striated? Okay, which ones have multiple nuclei per cell? Which ones have one nuclei per cell? Okay, very good. Which ones are spindle shaped? Smooth, right? Which ones have intercalated discs? All right, which ones are branched? Cardiac. Okay, very good. All right. So we'll finish up nervous right now. We'll go over the quiz you took on Wednesday, and then but we'll finish up nervous right now. So nervous tissue. All right. So here's your kind of characteristics. These are neurons. All right. We'll learn about that when we get to the nervous system. These cells are called neurons. Neurons. Well, neuron is singular, neurons is plural. Okay, so you see that, you know you're looking at nervous tissue. Does this look like muscle tissue? Does this look like epithelial tissue? Does this look like connective tissue? Okay, so they should all look kind of different. All right, another view here of the neurons. Okay, so know it's nervous tissue. All right, so that is that. So that is what you need to know about tissues. All right. So